Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So today we're going to talk about the Harvest Right freeze dryer. Is it worth your money? And will you die in the apocalypse if you don't have one of these beforehand and you don't use my affiliate link in the description? The shorter answer is absolutely. You're not going to make it that long if you don't go and drop $2,500 on this machine using my affiliate link in the description. Just kidding. Because we're all going to die in the apocalypse. Just kidding. Some of us are going to survive. Hopefully it's you. Let's talk about whether or not this is a good investment for you. Alright, all jokes aside, if you do want to get one of these machines, you can save a whopping 10% if you use my affiliate link in the description. Go check it out. Alright, so the main point of this video is to introduce a new accessory for the Harvest Right freeze dryer. That new accessory is the oilless vacuum pump. That sucker right there, oilless vacuum pump, it's a very critical component of the Harvest Right freeze drying system. This one is far superior to the original, and I think it's a game changer because it makes using the machine much easier and it's way quieter. I'm going to talk a bit more about it in a bit. So the short of it is, this machine allows you to preserve food for up to 30 years. Typically, if you go and buy freeze-dried food at the store, like in the camping section of a department store or something like that, it's going to be very expensive. You're looking at probably a 4 to 5 times markup compared to the actual value of that commodity that's in the package. So if you were to go and buy beef at the grocery store, chances are if you're buying that beef freeze-dried, there's going to be a significant markup. So this machine allows you to do that, and the idea is that you're going to save money in the long run if you do it yourself. Now there's things you have to factor in. You have to factor in labor, you have to factor in the energy costs of running the machine, the initial investment. So is it worth it is the question. Now, generally speaking, when you're stockpiling food, you go through a few phases. First, you want to get quantity. You want to get your calories. Once you have your calories locked in, then you can start branching out into quality. It's very easy to go out and buy a lot of calories. Rice, beans, Mylar bags for $1,000. You could probably get yourself years worth of food, literally for one person anyways. It doesn't take a whole lot of initial investment to get the calories and the quantities of food that you need. But if you want to get into quality of food, which is what you're going to want to do eventually, because no one wants to just eat rice and beans forever, and obviously doing some regenerative stuff like getting into gardening is the end game for all of us preppers, and so I'm still looking for land that I can do that on. But in the meantime, I've been freeze drying stuff because it's much easier to store energy, which is what food is, now when the grid is up. Watch a video I made called the 1 to 100 principle. Basically, it means that it's going to take you 100 times longer to do in a grid down situation as it would if you were doing it in a grid up situation. So that $40 that it takes you to go and buy a 40-pound bag of rice, in order to get that 40 pounds of rice, you're going to have to spend a lot of hours under the hot sun. And it's not even something which is obviously growing in this part of the world anyways. So you're probably going to be doing wheat or potatoes or something like that. But the idea is, if you can store as much energy as possible now, that would be a very efficient use of your resources. Freeze drying is excellent because it's going to preserve 95% of the nutrients of the food. It's going to preserve the same texture. So unlike dehydrated food, when you rehydrate it, it actually tastes good. So I would say that it tastes better than pretty much any survival food. Plus, it lasts 30 years. Name an MRE that can last 30 years that you'd actually want to eat. Do you actually want to eat MREs in the first place? I didn't think so. So, well, some of you do. But MREs are more geared towards military purposes. They're great for the military. They're terrible for emergency preparedness. I also want to add that this machine is not just for doomsday preparedness. It also is very practical. For instance, I keep a bag of freeze-dried chicken at the ready that I add to my foods throughout the day. I can just leave it on the cupboard, leave it in a jar. I don't have to worry about putting it in the fridge or anything like that. So really practical, even just for everyday eating. And freeze-dried food is so good that you will absolutely eat it regularly. It's not something that you're just going to store away and dread eating like a lot of survival foods are. Right out of the gates, I know there's some people frothing at the mouth in the comment section. Oh, this is way too expensive. You crazy prepper spending all this money on machines. Yes, it's an expensive machine. It's going to cost between $2,000 to $5,000 depending if you get all the trimmings and all the rest. But actually, I think it's $2,000 to $4,300. I think $4,300 is for the large version, which I wish I would have got, plus the oilless vacuum pump. Now, that seems crazy, and in some ways, if you're not going to be using it a lot, it is going to be a crazy investment, and I would not advise it unless you were absolutely 100% serious about strategizing how you're going to use this to make at least 100 batches a year, I would say. I'd say after the first 100 batches, it's easily going to pay itself off. Probably even before that when you really start crunching the numbers. So let's say theoretically, instead of spending $4,300 on this machine, you went out and bought $4,300 worth of Mountain House. That would give you probably enough food. I don't really know the exact numbers offhand, but I'm guessing maybe a year's worth of Mountain House food. Because if you're looking at your family, and lots of Mountain House, as great as it tastes, it's great for a Bugout bag. It's excellent for short-term emergency food supply, and it's also good to supplement your already existing preps. So if you already have like some rice and beans, you know, you buy a few Mountain House varieties or something like that to spice it up, and you know, that's going to carry you a long way. It's going to help out morale in crappy situations. If I do everything right, if I make sure the cycle is just as long as it needs to be, if I buy some meat that's on sale and I cook all that meat up, freeze dry it, you're probably paying up to 75% less for freeze-dried foods. For instance, I could go out and buy some freeze-dried beef. I would get maybe half a kilogram, which would be what, about a pound of freeze-dried beef, for around $50 to $60 USD. Now I can go buy some beef at a third of the cost, freeze dry it, and basically get that same food for 66% less than I would have paid had I purchased it pre-made, freeze-dried, all the rest. Now the cost of running the machine is an important question. It's going to cost you between $2 to $3.50 to do one cycle of the machine. So the operating costs of the machine are as follows. You have the initial investment of the machine, you have the energy that you put into the machine, and then you have the labor, if that's even a factor for you. For some people that's not a thing, but if you value your time, which you should, then that's another thing to consider. It's going to take time as well. I would say when all said and done, it may take you between an hour to 2 hours of your time per batch. That depends on what you're doing. You could probably do something in 15 minutes. If you just take some frozen vegetables or fruit that you got on sale, pour it on the tray, throw it in there, it's going to take you 2 minutes. If you want to prepare a bunch of food in advance, make meals, do that sort of thing, and then put it all on the trays nicely and, you know, vacuum seal it, all the rest, it's going to take you a little bit longer than that. Generally speaking, at the end of the day, when you crunch all the numbers, you're saving a lot of money compared to buying freeze-dried food from these bulk companies. And in my personal opinion, the companies that sell like the super bulk freeze-dried food, it doesn't taste that good, to be honest. It doesn't have that Mountain House quality to it that a lot of people have come to know. So I would strongly advise against buying the bulk freeze-dried stuff. Just make your own, because you have a lot more control with what you can do. Another one of the costs that people don't factor in is that it costs a lot to run a freezer. So if you got a bunch of meat and you want to throw it in the freezer, it's going to cost you a lot of energy to run that freezer year round. This comes at an initial cost, which is going to be higher than running a freezer. But in the long run, you're going to make that money back because you're not going to have to invest anything in keeping the food frozen. Obviously, if you live in a very cold climate during the winter time, you don't really need to be running a freezer, especially if you're in a grid down situation. Obviously, you don't want to be using energy to run a freezer when outside is already a freezer. So those are some of the workarounds. You buy things when they're on sale, you freeze dry them. You save money because you're not putting in a freezer. It's much cheaper than buying your freeze-dried food outright. The texture is amazing. So the benefits of freeze drying speak for themselves. So now for the oilless pump. Why is this so amazing, and why is this a huge game changer in my personal opinion? 2 reasons. It's quiet and it's very low maintenance. That's all you need to know. It doesn't require oil changes every single time, which is not a huge issue. It's just one more thing you have to do. And if you're a person who lives a highly active lifestyle like myself, then those minutes count. So not having to change the oil every batch like the original JB pump here, and not having to clean out the whole thing every 7 to 8 uses and making sure that the oil level is just right and all that. This is very low maintenance. It's incredibly quiet. So because I have this right next to where I record videos, do all my office work, stuff like that, it's important that it's quieter. And this machine is probably just a little bit louder than the Harvest Right freeze dryer itself. So it's a very, very quiet thing. I can have this running all the time now, barely notice. I can still shoot and edit videos in the next room, and it's fine. Does throw off quite a bit of heat, which is why I have it far away from the machine. Just don't want to damage the machine. And I have a sink here so I can allow, for drainage, what have you. It's a perfect little setup that I have going on here. Now there's a little bit of maintenance. Every 7 to 10 cycles, they suggest that you run some isopropyl rubbing alcohol through there, but that's much easier than having to do all that all the time. Like I say, when you get in the habit of doing it, it's not that hard. So this pump will work just fine if you don't want to make the investment into going into this. But in my personal opinion, for my lifestyle, it just makes things easier. I was a little discouraged from using the machine before because of that extra little bit of labor that came with it. And it's not because I'm lazy. I have a job, I have YouTube, I have a store, I have, my kids, my family, sick dogs, all the rest. Every minute counts for me. So if every minute doesn't count for you, an oil-based vacuum pump is going to work 100% just fine, no issues. But if you're like me, you want something streamlined, fast, I would strongly suggest going with this unit. It's just going to save you a lot of stress in the long run. But I do think it's a worthwhile investment for somebody who has the money, who can afford it, obviously. It's absolutely not necessary for your bug out bags. So don't fret. This, just because you don't have one of these doesn't mean you're not going to survive long term. This is just one extra appliance or tool that you can have in your arsenal to make sure you're just a little bit more prepared. And it's gonna make life a lot easier post-collapse, because morale boosting foods are important. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out. The best way to support this YouTube channel is to support yourself by gearing up through CanadianPreparedness.com or BugoutRoll.ca. Premium quality gear at the best possible price using the incredibly secure and easy to use Shopify platform. We offer free shipping to the United States for orders over $200 USD and free shipping to Canada over $75. So support the channel by supporting yourself.